Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Thursday, February 11th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Minnesota game, 203 days away. The game against Michigan in 289 days. This has been quite an eventful week for the Ohio State coaching staff, even though neither Ryan Day nor any of his 10 on-field assistants has actually gone anywhere. First linebackers coach Al Washington looked like he was headed to Tennessee before changing his mind. You can listen to Ross Fulton and I discuss all about that on Wednesday's Morning Scoop. And then last night, Pete Thamel of Yahoo reported that the Buckeyes were bringing in former Iowa State head coach Paul Rhodes as an analyst. Buckeye Scoop's Marc Givler joins me. Marc, this is something that other major programs like Alabama have done quite a lot. Ohio State really hasn't for the most part. So can you first of all let people know what an analyst actually does for a college football program?
Yeah, and I think each program can kind of tailor it a little bit to themselves. But it's a lot of scouting. It's a lot of schematics. It's not so much, drill work and individual instruction. And that's not what they're in here for. It's really just kind of advanced scouting, and you bring in certain guys that have certain an expertise, whether it's a certain position or what have you, and you just kind of let them go to work and help prep either that side of the ball or that position group or whatever it might be. And it's got if you're Ryan Day, if you're Kevin Wilson, you can't really look too far ahead on the schedule. But if you have some of these analysts around, they can kind of look down the road and kind of, okay, who are some of these potential roadblocks upcoming on the schedule, a month or two down the road. Let me get a head start on kind of how we can attack those teams. And it's really just getting more eyeballs, a different set of eyeballs, and so it's not just the same thing every week.
Yeah, and Rhodes is a defensive coach, for those who don't know, and in addition to being Iowa State's head coach, he was the defensive coordinator for the Pitt team that shocked West Virginia in 2007. That was the game that denied the Mountaineers a shot at the national title. That was the same day that Herbstreit was reporting about a Rich Rodriguez maybe jumping and taking another offer somewhere, and then they lost to Pitt that day. Last year, he was the DC for Arizona. He was also, strangely enough, a graduate assistant for the 1991 Ohio State football team. So it's been 30 years, but he has been on the Ohio State football campus before. And with Day opting to hire from within to replace Greg Madison, there was some concern that he should have been bringing in an outside voice to help Kerry Coombs. It seems like this is something that at least maybe somewhat addresses some of those concerns.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, they're not going to just scrap everything after last year. I know people are frustrated about the performance of the defense at times this past season, especially the secondary. I mean, it is unacceptable to be 122nd or whatever they were in pass defense. But, a lot of things went into that. And so certainly they're not going to just pull the ripcord on the Kerry Coombs deal after, basically a tumultuous season with COVID and everything. So this gives them a veteran presence, someone who has called a defense before, someone who knows a lot about defense, very well respected as a defensive coach. And it gives them another voice in the room and some other ideas and 30 years of experience, like you said. So I think it's a good match, and it's a little different from Alabama. I don't think this is a rehabilitation project of a once young and up and coming head coach that's trying to get back and be the next hot thing in college football again. Like some of the other guys Alabama's rehabilitated in the past. I think this is more of just kind of a veteran pair of eyeballs, much like really not all that much different than what Greg Madison was giving them, to be honest, the last couple of years.
Yeah, and you mentioned all the different things that went into Ohio State's 120 whatever pass ranked defense. One of those things were things were a little thin at cornerback for Ohio State last fall. While they did bring in a big class of DBs in 2021, that is still a big position of need for 2022 as well. Ohio State already has 5-star Jaheim Singletary committed there, along with 4-star Jair Brown. They're also in on a number of other elite corners in that class. They would, I think, obviously like to add at least one more there. You just put together your big board for the position for 2022. And, just the way Ohio State fans would like it, there's a 5-star right at the top of that. And it's a good old-fashioned Ohio State-Michigan recruiting battle. Who is at the top of your cornerback big board, Marc?
Yeah, it's Will Johnson, 5-star corner, Grosse Pointe, Michigan. That's been a back and forth so far. I said recently, the sooner he decides, it probably would be better for Ohio State if he would get this out of the way. But it sounds like he's probably going to wait a little bit longer, which in some ways helps Michigan, because what it senses to me is that he is hoping to see something from Michigan, whether that's, even if it's subconsciously. Clearly, by waiting, there's something that he would still like to see from Michigan, which means he's giving them a chance. He hasn't totally moved on from them after kind of a rough year or two there. They've rebuilt the staff a little bit. I think he's getting to learn more about those guys and building relationships there. So I think that's helpful for Michigan right now. But Michigan eventually is going to have to put a product on the field. I think that makes him feel comfortable about just their development in the defensive secondary, whereas Ohio State has done a great job of that over the years. And I think, I don't think he has any questions about that at this point there. So it's a big mental leap for a kid like that to commit to a place like Ohio State. I've said that before. I think there's been talk about, well, if he commits to Ohio State, would he flip? And I don't think so. I actually think it's just getting him to actually commit. I think it's getting him to clear that mental hurdle of, okay, I'm actually going to do this. I think that's the hard part. I think if you could land the commitment at some point, I think that would have been the hard part. And then it's okay. Now it's just, stay on him, but it's back and forth. Michigan's probably in a better spot than they were a month ago. 3 months ago, Ohio State wasn't in a very good spot. So it's been all over the place, and it should be one of the more entertaining battles maybe in the country this year.
And there is a complicating factor there for Ohio State, which is that his dad is a former Michigan football player. So, not that crossing the lines in the rivalry has never happened before. Mike McCray went and played for Michigan. The Boren brothers all played for Ohio State. So it can happen, but that is, it certainly doesn't help Ohio State's chances probably to have the kid of a former Michigan football player that they are trying to steal away from his dad's alma mater. Another guy who is, a little bit of a geographic challenge rather than a family one is Denver Harris. He is out of Houston, North Shore, Texas, another one of the absolute best defensive backs in the entire nation. What should people know about him? And did this maybe get a little tougher to pull him out of there now that Texas is looking like, oh, maybe they have a pulse again?
Yeah, I think two things have not helped Ohio State over the past, we'll call it 6 to 12 months. The first thing was everyone I've talked to down there, including Denver, some of his coaches, they've all told me if this dead period had never happened, if COVID just never was a thing, almost certainly Denver would have visited Ohio State by now. So that's kind of prevented them from kind of landing that big early punch in this one. And then, of course, yes, now Texas coaching change. And like I always say, when you're a first year coach, you get to sell whatever you want. I mean, you can tell anyone anything. I mean, you're selling hopes and dreams at that point, and you haven't had to put your money where your mouth is yet in terms of the on the field product. So you get a lot of that juice going that first off season, because everyone's just excited about, what the future could be at this program. So that happens everywhere. So now Texas has some juice going. Sarkisian called a great game in the national title game. He's carrying that over. People are excited about him as a coach again, after kind of rehabbing himself down there with Nick Saban. So that's a challenge as well. Obviously, Denver's a huge priority for them, and you're battling a bunch of SEC schools as well. So it's a challenge, but people keep telling me that he's really interested in Ohio State. He keeps telling me he's really interested in Ohio State. His coaches keep saying it, and quite frankly, I think Ohio State is a little surprised how well he's reciprocated the interest. I think there was some initial concern because they were a little late to offer him than some of the other schools, and that he kind of that was the one he wanted. That he didn't have, and I think people were a little bit concerned that maybe this was just for show, and once he got the offer, that he would kind of ghost Ohio State's coaches, and he could put it in his profile now and everything else. But that hasn't been the case. He's reciprocated the interest, so there's optimism if they can get him on campus.
Another guy to keep an eye on, maybe a little bit of a lower profile name, is Toriano Pride. He's from St. Louis, which is an area that Ohio State has pulled a ton of talent out of recently. Mookie Cooper, Jamison Williams, Cam Brown. There was a running back a few years ago. I forget his name. He was from St. Louis too. But that has like that without ever playing in Missouri, since before these kids were born, probably that has turned into like a nice little pipeline area for Ohio State. Let people know about Toriano Pride.
Yeah. So a guy who's picked up a lot of steam here the last few months with a lot of different schools. Like, so Alabama's recruiting him, Clemson's recruiting him. Big national offer list, Ohio State on him. I wouldn't rule out Missouri. I think, everyone's going to look at Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson and be like, well, he's got to go to one of those three. I actually think Missouri's right in there at this point. Not a kid who's super vocal, so kind of plays things a little tight. But I think there's confidence there that Ohio State's definitely on the short list for sure. And then it's a matter of, where does he fit in Ohio State's plans? I mean, how long do you chase Will Johnson and Denver Harris before you start, widening the search a little bit? And, you don't want to fill up, but you don't want to get left at the altar by Denver Harris and Will Johnson either and have to take a lesser player. So I think the timing here is going to be interesting to see. And I look like with all of these guys really, but especially with guys like Toriano in Denver, I look at, okay, if the dead period's up on April 15th, are these guys making an effort to get to campus in April and May? It's going to be easier for Toriano. It's drivable. But let's see what happens here in April and May.
Next guy on your list is actually committed somewhere else right now. Devontae Jackson, 5-star corner out of Santa Ana, California, Mater Dei High School. He's committed to USC. USC is a program that is just sort of perpetually in flux. It just, is Clay Helton going to be the head coach 10 minutes from now, 10 months from now? Who knows? Obviously you would prefer to have a kid who's a little closer to, Columbus. That's easier than pulling someone from all the way across the country, especially if he's already committed to a school out there. But he's on the list, so obviously you think there is at least a decent possibility of Ohio State being able to pull off a flip here. Yeah,
I mean, the biggest, not so much the flip, but the biggest piece of information I continue to get on Damani is that he's going to take visits. Commitment or no commitment, he's going to take a round of visits at some point. And if he takes the full 3, 4, 5 officials, which I would expect him to do, then Ohio State's going to be one of them. Ohio State's not going to stop recruiting him. Why would they? If they believe he could take visits and he's one of the best players in the country, there's no harm there in recruiting him. So they're going to stay on it. I've never been a big Damani Jackson to Ohio State guy. I never, even when that was kind of a thing a couple months ago, something about that wasn't right to me. So I'm not super optimistic there, but just the fact that I know they're going to continue to recruit him. He is one of the best players in the country, and he is probably going to take visits. That's enough for me to put him on there. And look, it's hard to recruit Southern California when USC is stable. Are they stable right now? They're more stable than they were a year ago at this time, certainly. So that's why they've been able to pick up some juice. Could that change this fall if they lose 4 or 5 games? Sure. I mean, I don't think it's a thing where the guys, Clay Helton has built up so much goodwill that he could, survive a bad season. But, things are a little more stable. So you're seeing USC keep some kids at home that maybe were looking elsewhere when USC was less stable a year ago.
Yeah, Clay Helton is, it feels like he's been on the hot seat for about 4 or 5 years now. He is like the Rasputin of coaching. You cannot possibly get him out of that job. No matter what you try, just he keeps hanging on to that job. Last guy on your list, another name that's a little bit more under the radar, another Michigan kid, actually, Dylan Tatum from West Bloomfield, Michigan. That is a Detroit suburb. Let us know about Dylan Tatum.
Yeah, and he's kind of the athlete of the group. He could play running back. He could play safety. I think probably maybe a slot corner is maybe his best bet, but he's a versatile guy. It's one of those weird ones where I think Ohio State's in his top 3 or 4, but I don't think they have a great chance of landing him, which I know sounds kind of weird. But I think he's going to stay in Michigan, probably with the Wolverines, possibly Michigan State, but I think he's going to go to Michigan. His teammate Donovan Edwards signed there, big time running back in the last class. I'm not sensing a ton of confidence that he's going to leave the state from the people I talked to, on the Ohio State side of things. So But he's a guy they've recruited him for 2 years now. He's visited, they like him. So he's kind of that rounding out the top five guy. Wouldn't expect him in the class, but would expect to continue to hear, his name and Ohio State kind of linked together a little bit for at least until he makes a decision.
And finally, one very welcome sign that things might be a little more normal this year. You got to cover an honest to goodness high school football recruiting showcase event last weekend in Columbus. Let people know about the Raw Talent Columbus Showcase and just how nice it was to be doing something like that in person again.
Yeah, it was nice. I did a little stuff in Florida last month, but other than that, as far as football camps, it had probably been July since I think I had done a football camp. So it was great. I mean, look, Raw Talent, they started out in Cleveland. They've kind of branched out. They've got they're even in Texas now. So they've kind of branched out. They're doing some different stuff. They've got a Columbus group. Duran Grant is kind of running that along with Mark Harris, who founded Raw Talent initially. So they were down there, doing drill work with the guys, and it was good seeing Duran. I wrote about him going into his freshman year. I saw him at a camp, and he still remembers that and tells me all the time, I was the first guy to write about him. So I always kind of joke with him about that and tell him how badly I missed on him. He wasn't as good as I said he'd be. I kind of mess with him, but it's fun. It was fun catching up with Duran, and there were some good kids there. It's nice. It feels like camps are starting to come back a little bit. We got the best of the Midwest in Indianapolis coming we're not all the way back to normalcy yet, but we are starting to, some of these ritualistic events that I'm, used to seeing are coming back. I saw a couple of guys I liked on Sunday. Delaney Wilburn out of Groveport Madison's got an offer from Colorado. He's kind of a safety linebacker, hybrid, maybe kind of maybe in the Pete Warner type of mold is kind of what he did at Cathedral coming out. Interesting kid. Isaiah Foster out of Lima Senior was there. He's a 6'1.5", 185-pound defensive back who has some early MAC offers. Kentucky's possibly close. They're closing in. And, so some good looking players, no one that's, firmly on the Ohio State radar yet, but I keep wondering about some of these 2022 guys, and you wonder how much they've missed out on the last year in terms of evaluation opportunities. And so maybe one of these kids, gets a look from Ohio State this summer and something happens, but there were some good players there, and it just felt good to be out there, seeing some guys I hadn't seen before and just kind of feeling like like it was 2 years ago. Like we turned the clock back 2 years ago, and I'm out there looking for players.
Yeah, it does feel like if ever there's going to be a year for guys to just come completely out of nowhere, like this is it. This is the year. If no one's been able to evaluate guys in person for like a year, like, yeah, this is the time when it is going to happen for someone and probably for a lot of people. And I mean, that's something we've talked about in the past with guys, the missed opportunities for guys who probably missed their chance to play D1 ball just because they didn't get a chance to camp last summer and maybe missed a whole senior season, all that kind of stuff. It is really nice to see that stuff starting to come back. This week, also, the Big Ten is starting to release some of their spring schedules. The first half of the men's lacrosse schedule is out. They dropped the softball schedule this week. I think the baseball schedule may have come out as well. So, yes, things are slowly starting to return a little bit more towards normal, which is more than a welcome sign at this point. Mark, thank you for joining us. And thank you guys all for listening this morning. We had, there is plenty going on right now. As I feel like I keep saying this, but man, it's supposed to be the off season. And yet every day there's just no shortage of stuff going on with the Buckeyes, and especially at buckeyescoop.com. The Ask the Insiders board is humming right now. Lots of intrigue on the recruiting trail. Hey, the number one player in the class of 2021 still hasn't signed yet, and he still has Ohio State at the top of his list. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on in the next month or two. And plenty of intrigue in the transfer portal. And spring ball is coming pretty soon. There is a lot going on. Oh, by the way, Ohio State also has a top 5 basketball team. Worth keeping an eye on that one as well. They play Friday night against Indiana. We'll probably be talking about that on tomorrow's morning show. So thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.